Good evening again. I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole for the Village of Cary for Tuesday, January 7th, 2020 to order with roll call, please.
Cavelli? Here. Weinhammer? Here. Collier?
Here.
Kraus?
Here.
Betts? Here.
Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll now open public comments. Is there anybody who would like to address the Committee of the Whole? None. We will close public comments at 6:51. Our first matter of business is discussing commercial fleet leasing programs with Enterprise Fleet Management. Eric?
Thank you, Mayor. This evening, as Administrator Reif mentioned, we have been busy year-round, actually, working on our budget and capital planning. The summit for that work will be held on January 18th with our workshop. But ahead of that, we wanted to give the Committee of the Whole an idea and a flavor of one of the ideas that we've been working with Enterprise Fleet Management on with regards to finding a sustainable way to maintain and replace our vehicles and heavy equipment. This is an idea that's been utilized by some of the area municipalities besides us, so we're not blazing an entirely new trail, but it is an idea that has worked for other government agencies, and it's one that we wanted to consider and provide the committee with some information on. So this evening we have from Enterprise Fleet Management, Rachel Culp and Gabby Harding. They're going to give you a short presentation with an overview of the way that this program could work for the Village of Cary with some specific numbers and analysis tied directly to our fleet. So with that, I'll turn it over to Gabby and Rachel, and the staff is also available, Chief Finland and I, and Finance Director Ducharme, if you have questions.
Before you too, Board, is a handout provided by Enterprise as well.
Awesome. Thank you all for allowing us time to come and present our program. My name is Gabby Harding. I'm an account executive with Enterprise Fleet Management, and this is Rachel Colt. She's an account manager. We're going to run through a very quick PowerPoint to talk about who we are, who we work with, and how we might be able to benefit the village, and then we'll allow time for a couple questions at the end if there is any. Thank you. So Enterprise Fleet Management is a sister company to Enterprise RentACar. We partner with companies and municipalities that own their own fleets of vehicles to help them lower the costs associated with those. Currently in Chicagoland, we partner with about 40 government entities. A few partners you may recognize. The Village of Round Lake Beach has been a customer for about 5 years. They have 67 vehicles. They have 27 of those on lease with us. They were one of the first municipalities to lease squad cars. Now we have about 20 entities and 125 squad cars on lease total. The Arlington Heights Park District, we work with Benjamin Ray over there. Out of their 25 vehicles, they were averaging paying cash for 2 vehicles a year. About half of those vehicles were over 10 years old, which resulted in higher maintenance cost. Due to the fact that they had limited capital, they were unable to replace the vehicles if they wanted to. So with our funding model, we were able to help them get them caught back up and replace 11 vehicles in the first year. And then the Village of Algonquin is a newer customer with us. They started with about 20 half-ton pickup trucks. They're going to replace them every 6 months due to your high government incentive and our ability to sell vehicles. They're actually going to make money on the resale of those vehicles every 6 months. When looking at new partnerships, we know that we must be vetted out. With that being said, Sourcewell, formerly NJPA, released a bid, an RFP for fleet management a couple years ago, and we were deemed the lowest cost provider. Typically, this satisfies the due diligence process, and you're able to utilize that contract. This is everything that we offer as a fleet management company. We are full service. So we're going to acquire the vehicles for you, order directly from the manufacturer. We're going to fund them down to a residual to free up cash. We'll talk more about the specifics on the lease in a couple minutes. We have a fixed maintenance program for your newly leased vehicles, and for the existing ones, we're going to put a program on them to be able to track the maintenance spend per vehicle. We're going to sell the vehicles on your behalf through our wholesale channels. And as far as aftermarket, we'll help with the logistics so that we deliver the vehicles to your staff turnkey, and then help with the license, title, registration, and the administrative side is that. We know we aren't all things to all people, but our customers do see the most value when we're managing as many aspects of the fleet as we can. So if any of you have ever rented a car from us, you may notice that that vehicle is no more than like a year old with 20,000 miles on it. That's because as Enterprise Rent-A-Car, we figured out the right time to get out of our rental fleet. More times than not, we're selling those vehicles for more than what we paid for them, kind of the secret sauce to Enterprise Rent-A-Car. So what we do for our customers is find the optimal time to replace every vehicle in your fleet. With your aggressive buy and our ability to sell, typically the right time to replace a vehicle is 1 to 5 years, not including the medium duty pickup trucks in your fleet with like dump bodies and stuff like that. By lowering the average age of your fleet, the operational costs are going to go down as well. And again, this circle looks different for every single vehicle in your fleet, but our job is to find that right time for all of those vehicles. Once we find that time, we have to pay for the vehicle. So today you're paying cash. Rather than doing that, you can finance, which is represented in the red arrow, but most of our customers utilize what's called an open-ended equity lease. In this case, we have a $30,000 vehicle. If after 5 years we know that that vehicle is going to sell for $15,000 because we're really good at predicting out what the market's going to be, rather than writing that vehicle down to zero, we're going to write it down to a value of $7,500. It's approximately $125 a month lower in payment, which can free up cash to use somewhere else. There's no wear and tear penalties. It's not like a traditional dealership lease. There's no over mileage charge or anything like that. You're essentially paying for the part of the vehicle that you're going to use if we found that time for you. And this is an example of one of our customers, a few vehicles that we sold on their behalf. You'll see in this mix, and I know it's probably hard to see, but there's different cargo vans, there's a pickup truck with a dump body and different sedans. The average age that these vehicles were in service was a little under 5 years, and the average effective depreciation across those vehicles was $112 a month. Rather than using the auction, we sell our customer vehicles through the wholesale channels, just like our rental fleet. The timing of selling these vehicles is important because selling a vehicle in the spring and summer months is obviously going to sell for much more than in the winter months. This is why we're presenting this idea to you now, because if we order vehicles now, they won't deliver until the spring and the summer months after your budget year's already started. And how our lease works is you don't pay for the vehicles until they deliver. And with us, you'll have an account manager who is Rachel Colt.
Yeah, so as Gabby mentioned, I would be the account manager who handles your account. And part of what I'm tasked to do every single year is meet with you and plan. So about 6 months before your budget is approved, I'd be sitting down and I would be planning what should be replaced over the next year or 12 months. I'd bring to the table market values, analysis, recommendations. It's also part of my job to evaluate multiple vehicles based on the total cost of ownership and make a recommendation that's the best for you. Also, I would be doing an annual client review every single year, which is basically what tells us how your fleet lays out in terms of dollars and cents. So it's really telling us where are areas of opportunity within your fleet, as well as where are we doing well. So over the last year, we've spent a lot of time with members of your staff going through and putting together a plan as we would every single year.
So we put together a recommendation for your upcoming budget year that we've been working on. So we know that there's no room in the budget this year for those medium duty pickup trucks. So we looked at the public works and the police fleet. So for the public works fleet, we looked at selling 4 vehicles. Those vehicles are worth about $20,000. You'll see the purchase price, if you were to pay cash for these vehicles, would cost you $144,000 versus your first year lease cost with us is $26,000. So your first year cash flow impact is about $118,000 on those 4 vehicles. And then for the police vehicles, based on age, mileage, and officer safety, we've recommended 2 patrol units to be replaced. And again, you'll see the cash is about $84,000 versus the first year lease cost at $21,000. And then we plan on selling 2 patrol cars to replace with administrative vehicles. And if you were to pay cash for those, $53,000 versus a first year lease cost of $11,000. All the supporting documentation is in the packet that you have. And at this time, I can open it up for questions.
So we're looking at doing this for all the public works vehicles and the police department vehicles, all
It
of
would
them?
be a gradual process. As the vehicles age out, we would look at leasing new vehicles. Eric, do you want to address that a little bit more?
You're right on. Here.
Yes.
Just want to make sure. I don't want to be called out on anything here, but
It would happen,
It's an
yeah,
interesting
it would
program.
happen over time.
yeah,
Okay.
we wouldn't do it all at once. And we would have an opportunity. I would imagine we would do this for a few years and see how it works out for us and see how these types of program works. And, we just were talking about this last budget cycle with the end of Meyer Mining and losing that money for our vehicle replacement, that, staff took it upon themselves to look at opportunities to stretch our vehicle dollars. And this seems like a decent plan.
I would, I guess, emphasize, though, that if we do decide to go this route, I think this is more for the long haul that we'd want to do this. I understand wanting to try things out, but I think this is more of a long-term solution for us. I think it's a good option for us, stretch the dollars out, and I think there's some cost savings, too, that can be realized with this program.
Do we sign a contract with Enterprise, and how long is the contract?
So the contract, you're not held to a certain amount of time. It's vehicle by vehicle.
Okay.
A question that I wanted to ask about the particular vehicles. Pretty much our whole fleet's Ford. I'm a GM guy by trade, but so, whatever. I noticed you spec'd out some GM along with the Ford. Is there any particular reason why that is? Is that a cost savings or just?
Good question. So for the police vehicles, we are going to stick with the Ford Interceptor. And then as well for the one pickup truck for the public works fleet, we're going to do the Ford as well. The reason that we chose GMC for the pickup trucks is there's such a large government incentive because GM is trying to keep the market share away from Ford. So it's a really large incentive to get out of that vehicle quicker. It's worth a lot of money earlier, so that's why.
And
Did
from
you want to
the,
talk? Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, and from the maintenance perspective with regards to having, like currently we're primarily a Ford shop. And when the entire fleet is managed and maintained in-house, the standardization of parts, given that we only have a single mechanic on staff, obviously lends itself to an easier operation for efficiencies and skill. With this program, these vehicles will often be turned around on a short time frame where we're actually not even having to do oil changes in some of these vehicles on a one-year lease, for example. And then as far as parts and maintenance, we're not even getting out of warranty, or there's a strong likelihood we don't have any maintenance to do on some of these vehicles. So having a mixed fleet of different brands and manufacturers actually won't be a problem. We would be selecting vehicles based on Enterprise's recommendation for in terms of the resale value, the residual values, and the efficiencies for the program.
When you said it's phased in, though, Eric, you said every year we're going to go step by step how many vehicles we have and what is maintenance now.
Yeah. It will vary depending on the, the age of the vehicles that need to be replaced. So obviously, we're not going to come in and switch out to a lease on a vehicle we just purchased last year.
Right.
So there'll be a certain amount of time before the majority or all the fleet is incorporated into the leasing program. But year by year, we have a current CIR capital improvement plan that lays out approximately when vehicles are replaced, and we'll follow that also with the year-to-year recommendations from Rachel and her team. If we were to.
Regarding the
program.
maintenance, did you want to talk about just the in-house cost savings with freeing up Al Ribbon?
Oh, yes. Your Rachel can kind of go through. They did analysis on our maintenance costs based on historical dollars allocated to it. And I think you can kind of summarize the results of that. But there is definitely a cost savings. There's a savings, but we also, like I mentioned, we operate a shop with a single mechanic, which we do need to maintain for those on-the-spot repairs and vehicles not in the program, especially winter season with plow trucks that always have issues that will come upon us unexpectedly. And it also eliminating some of the scheduled maintenance that goes on a lot of these light-duty vehicles, we'll be able to actually push upward in the work list for the mechanic, other projects that get deferred. Because obviously right now our snow plowing fleet and our police patrol does have priority for the mechanic on any maintenance that goes on, whether it's scheduled or unscheduled. So we do have a lot of other equipment that gets deferred and does take some time to get to for our one mechanic, which will actually realize some better efficiencies and maintenance on our other equipment as well.
So down the line, are we looking at a reduction in personnel then, down at the Public Works?
No, as I mentioned, we're not a shop unlike some of the other agencies that maybe have joined the program that have had 3 or 4 mechanics and can reduce that with attrition down to 1 or 2. We've always been operating with just 1. And for us to not have a mechanic on staff would be, in our opinion, not the most responsible way to operate a first responding fleet of snowplows and other vehicles.
He'd be freed up to do other things that we need to have taken care of.
And you mentioned
Or the
Al.
backlog.
Did he retire or did
No,
he hit
he's
like
still-
30 years or 35 or something?
Yeah.
'Cause I
He's still
remember
here,
coming
yeah.
forestry.
He's
Okay.
Yeah.
he's got
Thought it was
protect
100.
time. Yeah, that's why, And he could just be deployed in other areas.
Who knows?
Any other questions?
The email or the PowerPoint, can we get that sent to us just so I can look
Yeah.
at the cost savings?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely.
This is something that we'll be talking about with our CIP starting on the 18th and then rolling it into, the decision's not going to be made like in the next week or so, but whatever information that you feel that you need, let staff know and we'll make sure that you get it. But this is something top of our list for CIP, how it falls into place. So thank you very much. Greatly appreciate your time.
Is there some general interest from the board, just as we put together a CIP presentation of trying to make assumptions of, do we want to purchase vehicles or do we want to go this leasing route? Can I make some assumptions that we may want to go the leasing route for the CIP presentation?
I would want to go leasing if there's cost savings, obviously, yes.
Likewise.
I assume so, yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. We'll still send out the information. We're not making any final decisions too. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And one last thing on tonight is a discussion regarding ordinance granting certain text amendments to the Village of Cary zoning ordinance to add an associate member of the Board of Zoning, Planning, and Appeals. This was to further discuss implementing at Trustee Weinhammer's request a 9-person or exploring 9-person members versus 7.
Thank you, Mayor. As I mentioned, this request was discussed at our December meeting. Chairman Patrick Corey was at the meeting to discuss the request for an associate member, and during the discussion, there was a conversation regarding potentially going or exploring the option to expand to a 9-member plan commission or zoning ZPA. The packet you have before you kind of lists communities that utilize different size structures. Since this packet's been delivered, I've had additional discussions with our village attorney as well, as far as state statutes regarding the size of plan commissions and zoning boards. So some of the communities they can see here that utilize a 9-member community or a plan commission under state statute, you can have, there's no limit, as I understand it, for the size of a plan commission. But under same statutes, zoning boards are restricted to memberships of 7. So in the instance with our ZPA currently is combined the services into one body. If you were to expand to 9 members, they would be able to have 9 members to review cases that would involve plan commission duties, which would be conditional uses, map amendments, text amendments, and PUDs. But any item that would require a zoning board approval, the board would only be allowed to have 7 members voting on that. So 2 members would be designated to the, 9 members would be dedicated to the plan commission, and 7 of those members would be dedicated to the zoning board. So if a request came before the board for a variance request or an appeal of a decision, administrative decision, that would be determined by 7 of the members and not all 9 members if the full board is expanded that. Likewise with the associate member, if adding an associate member to add that 8th member would also be under the plan commission purview. So if a zoning board case or zoning request came in that required a variance or an appeal, only if the 7 members that are appointed to the zoning board function would be able to vote. So the associate member would not apply towards the zoning board component of the board.
Would that be even if a member was absent?
Correct.
So if there's only 4 members there, the alternate member still wouldn't have a vote?
Correct. As I understand it from the state statute, you're limited to 7, and we're not a home rule community, so we couldn't amend the code to provide the 8 members for the zoning board.
Right, so that would only be as to Board of Appeals matters, and that essentially relates to variations. Special uses, PUDs, subdivision matters, conditional uses, text amendments is all Plan Commission. And that's who the alternate would serve, that's the body the alternate would serve on.
Yeah, so variances or appeals would be the other decisions that would go before the zoning board specifically.
So changing the zoning of a property that we have in town from one designation to another designation would require just the 7 members and not the alternate member wouldn't be allowed to vote on something like that?
For a map amendment with a zoning change.
If we went from single family to multifamily?
Correct. If we had an associate member, that would be under the purview of the associate member.
They would be able to vote on something like that?
Yeah, in the case that there's a member missing from the zoning board, but if there's a variance request to reduce the setback from 15 feet to 10 feet or building height, that type of relief is requested, that would just be the zoning board members. The associate member would not be allowed to partake in that discussion.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not in favor of changing anything that we have with the zoning and planning board at this time. I'm happy with what we have with the 7 members and feel that as a board, we should continue with the 7 members and move forward with that and not add this alternate member. Because basically, when I look at the past votes, that alternate member would have been able to vote at practically every meeting that we've had in the past. You know, if 1 member is gone, you have 6 members, that alternate member gets to vote, unless it's what you just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what we're doing is we're adding an 8th member to the zoning and planning board to try to take care of those times when we have a 3-1 vote and it comes to us as a negative recommendation, even though the 3 that voted for it in favor of what that proposal might have been, it comes to us as a negative recommendation, and then we would, as a board, would have to have a supermajority to vote to move forward with what they want to do, as opposed to now they get that 4th vote there that's now a 4-1 vote, and it comes to us with a positive recommendation, then it's just a simple 3-3 vote, and then it's broken by the mayor.
Yeah, I understand, just to clarify, for variations, any variation requires a minimum of 4 votes. But any conditional use text amendment or map amendment of zoning change would require a simple majority of the members of the Plan Commission that are present. So if there are 5 members present and the vote is 3-2, that would pass under our regulations and under state statute as well.
Ryan, what is the little one next to Lake Zurich in Lincolnshire and Mount Prospect?
Those are in communities that currently utilize the associate member as what was being discussed. Those communities have an associate member on those commissions.
Okay.
So they are communities that currently utilize that model if it's something that the village were to pursue.
And do those members have the right to vote
Yes.
in all of them?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other comments?
So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding something. You mentioned we're not a home rule community. So one of the things that I had asked last time if it was possible to do is that if we did do this associate member, that they only had the vote when a quorum was needed. Because one of the issues that's brought up, and I think it's a valid issue, is if you have a resident coming forward on a zoning matter and they're not able to have their case heard because we don't have a full board, that's when that associate member would step up and do that vote. So with us not being a home rule community, can we not stipulate that?
Well, from the way that associate member would be applied to, it would be towards the planning commission functions of the department or of the board. So if it was a request from a resident for a variation, that associate member wouldn't be able to vote on that particular matter, regardless of whether they were stipulated only for a quorum. They wouldn't be a permanent member of the ZPA. It would be the 7 members only.
So I guess what I'm saying is could we stipulate that this associate member is essentially, because obviously, Jeff has some concerns, and I'm hearing what he's saying, and I'm trying to come up with a way we can resolve some of that concern, but also resolve some of the issues that you're running into on the zoning board. And that would be that that person would get a vote if needed. So they're part of the commission, they're part of the planning, they're part of the process for, listening and everything else, but they're not actually voting on a matter unless needed.
And there's only been the one time in the past 3-5 years that they haven't had a quorum, and they would have needed that alternate member
To make a quorum.
to make a quorum. Otherwise, they've had a quorum, and they can vote on it, and it moves forward.
Correct.
And I thought Chairman Corey brought up a lot of valid points. And that's why, I do support this, but I also am listening to Trustee Krause's concerns. I'm trying to figure out a way we can.
I would be in favor of it if they didn't have that vote until that one time when they needed those 4 votes. If only 3 members showed up and the alternate member showed up, then I'd be in favor of having an alternate member. But to just say we're going to give this 8th member of the Zoning and Planning Board a vote, anytime there's a member missing, except for a few exceptions that you've brought up, I'm not in favor of that.
Did you want to comment on?
Yes, without complicating this too much, I think, Brian, you just noted that the only time that a supermajority vote is required, I think under the scenario that you're describing, Trustee Krause, is the Zoning Board of Appeals, that you need 4 votes on the Zoning Board of Appeals to approve a variation.
Correct.
And if you fail to get those 4 votes, you can force a supermajority vote at the board level. The Plan Commission doesn't have any of those rules, those voting rules. So the extra member of the Plan Commission does not create that same supermajority vote problem that I think you're describing, if I'm understanding the concern that you have. So again, the Plan Commission deals with special uses, conditional uses, subdivisions, PUDs, text amendments, map amendments. The Plan Commission does most of the work in the village. It has the greatest jurisdiction over zoning matters. The Zoning Board of Appeals only deals with variations, which I am guessing is not a major part of their business.
Yeah, from a code perspective too, the board has given the various authority to the zoning board for granting variances. So in that purview, that if they have 4 members present and they support a variance, certain variations can be approved at the zoning board level. It's only extreme variations or variations are larger than 20% have to come before the village board for final approval. But any development going forward that's over 2 acres in size in the community essentially requires a PUD. That goes through the full zoning process before the Plan Commission as a recommendation body that would come before the village board for a decision. But only variances in certain instances would be at the zoning board level and recommended to the village board for consideration.
Right, so as long as the Plan Commission can conduct business, as long as they have a quorum, then a majority vote carries the day. And it does not force any other different vote here at the board level, any supermajority votes. And I don't know then if that addresses the concern you're raising about the
I'm still
forcing
not
the
in favor of
supermajority
it, so
vote.
no, I'm not in favor of this at all.
Okay.
And just listening to the comments here, sorry, Mayor, just listening to the comments here and also reflecting back on what Chairman Corey had mentioned at the last meeting, he's looking to have it be a full board, of wanting to have a full board at the meeting so the petitioner has a complete board. It's not just for the voting. He also had mentioned too a training ground and having someone here. I'm not sure if they're just able to vote in these one-off circumstances, which is once over the last several years, if we're really going to get someone that's interested in participating with the zoning board.
I was just going to say that because I was contacted by Chairman Corey about this. He was surprised that we were even discussing a 9-member. He does not support that. He said the zoning board was in favor of the alternate for the reasons that he had stated before. And he thinks that like what Jake had said, it's an unbelievable training ground for somebody. And it's a benefit to the village. It shows our professionalism that when somebody comes before the board, we have an active body. It is his desire to have an associate member be able to chime in at all meetings and be able to question people and be able to have his questions answered and contribute in a productive way to whatever is being presided. And if he's able to vote or she able to vote, then that's a good opportunity. But I don't see the fallback on this. I don't see the negative application to this. I think this is best practices. The zoning chair came to us looking for some help with regards to this. I think it's a good opportunity for us to get some new blood into the village, for people to pay attention to see what's going on, to harvest some new people to help us with various things that we have. And it's hard. People have lives. They're busy. There's a lot of times when people are absent, and it's good to have somebody that can be able to plug and play, as I say. With regards to having an associate member come to every single meeting in hopes of fulfilling a quorum, in my opinion, and that's just a waste of time for somebody. Why would they want to be a part of something that they can't actively be a part of? So I think that I think it's best practices for the village. I'm always looking at ways that we could enhance what we do, what's best practice. Limiting government, adding more people to the board, I don't think is, I think if we added 9 people to the board, we'd just have more trouble. We'd have less people. And then, Jeff talks about the quorums and the voting and that kind of stuff. I don't look at it that way. I look at what's the best practices. What are people going to be able to decipher through these things? So I do support this. It's what the zoning board has asked for. It was a unanimous recommendation from the zoning board. Other than that, also, Trustee McAlpine notified me today to reiterate the fact that she is in favor of the zoning board with the associate member being able to participate every meeting if there's a vacancy.
The only reason I did inquire about the 9 members is because he said that, as an example, Crystal Lake did do that. So that's why I was inquiring
I believe
about it.
Crystal Lake, their ordinance states 9, but they run with 7.
They currently have 7 members, yes.
Okay, well, that's what he had said at that time. And then as I'm looking at this, there's about 47, if I counted correctly, towns listed, and there's only 5 with an associate member. So it's not something that's completely, wildly done. It's not a majority of, even close to what majority of the other towns are doing. So I do have some hesitation with having an associate member. I would prefer then to keep it at 7 as well, but that's just my opinion. I know everybody gets a vote.
That's what we're looking for tonight. Jeff is a no.
You reiterate how the member, if it goes forward, how the member will be chosen?
Well, there'll be an interview process. I could have a board member with Chairman Corey, and then Chairman Corey and I would interview the final candidates.
I'm fine with the associate. Yeah, I'm probably fine with it.
I'd like to see it move forward and at least try it and see how the process goes.
Okay. It'll be 5-2 to get that done. Thank you, Brian, for all your research on this. I appreciate it.
And no to the 9 member, just
No
confirming
to,
that?
yeah.
Yes.
No,
Okay.
fine.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? There are no nays.
Okay.